Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, is sadly not nearly as iconic as Catwoman, but I think that mostly comes down to the lack of a presence in the movies. She has yet to appear in any of the Spider-Man movies apart from The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and then again, that was only technically, really. However, she was meant to be in the Sam Raimi movies, and would have been played by the amazing Anne Hathaway. Now, granted, she was supposed to be in Spider-Man 4, but what if she debuted earlier than that? What if Black Cat was in Spider-Man's 1, 2, and 3? In Spider-Man 1, when Peter is still in high school, we see that one of his fellow classmates is actually Felicia Hardy, a very beautiful girl that a lot of guys are hitting on. And she's a naturally flirty girl, but is clearly into more intelligent guys, which is why she rejects the advances of Flash Thompson, who flirts with her behind Mary Jane's back. Now, MJ is fully aware of this, and she can't help hating Felicia just a little bit for obvious reasons. Now, we most prominently, however, can see that Felicia clearly has a thing for Peter, but of course he's oblivious since he has his heart set on MJ. So now we actually don't see Felicia again until Spider-Man 2, where we discover that she's just started going to the same college as Peter. Now when Peter arrives at the college in a hurry, he bumps into Felicia, literally, who he's only just discovered is going to the same school as him. She apologizes to him and helps him pick his books back up. We also see that she's been reading a Spider-Man newspaper, which doesn't go unnoticed by Peter. Peter thanks her, and she explains that she's apparently in the same class as Peter, too, and the two have a laugh about it, and it's kind of clear that they're having a little bit of a moment here. That's, of course, when Dr. Connor shows up to spoil the mood and tell him that planning is not a major at this university. And after this, we see that Felicia, who overheard all this, actually comforts Peter. She says that she knows that he'll catch up soon. She compares it to the books he just dropped. Sometimes things you need can just fall right through your fingers, but it's never too late to pick them back up again. So now later in the movie, we see that Felicia has begun dating a complete and total asshole who just abuses her. In fact, her boyfriend berates her publicly at the college, and Peter, who's trying not to be Spider-Man by the way right now, debates about stepping in and finally decides to. He actually protects Felicia against her asshole boyfriend, and we see her even more attracted to Peter now. Now we see Felicia soon reading more Spider-Man newspapers, and at the end of Spider-Man 2, we see her begin taking self-defense classes and doing exercises at her apartment while her Black Cat watches on. So now we get to Spider-Man 3, and Peter's doing a lot better than he's ever been in his daily life. He's with Mary Jane, New York loves him, and he's balancing everything, including his college class. Now Felicia is clearly still into Peter, and we follow her home, and soon discover that she's become a costume vigilante in her own right named Black Cat. Now at one point, MJ sees Peter reading an article about her, and we can see that there's just a little twinge of jealousy on her face. So now we see Black Cat and Spider-Man meet for the first time, and she's very, very flirty with him. They obviously don't recognize each other, but the attraction is clearly there. Now, Peter is comedically nervous around her. Now, he doesn't act on this attraction, though, because Mary Jane is still his one and only, but Peter can't help but smile at the effect he's apparently having on women, which, believe me, is exactly how nerdy guys react to more than one girl being into them at the same time. I would know. So now later on in the movie, when Peter gets the black suit, we actually see him answering Black Cat's flirts, and she's a little taken aback by this more confident Spider-Man, but still, nothing happens between them yet, but they do work together to stop a bank heist, and the attraction between them grows, and they actually develop a bond, because, think about it, this is the first time Peter's actually had a partner helping him in the field, so he can't help but grow a little bit more attached to her. And so now later on in the movie, we see Eddie Brock actually fake a photo of Spider-Man and Black Cat making out, and JJ is very, very happy about that because it makes Spider-Man look terrible, and nothing sells better than scandal. Now, Mary Jane is obviously pissed off. She and Peter get into a heated argument with each other, and MJ officially takes off. She leaves him. And so now Peter, as he does whenever he gets angry now, turns to the black suit, and under its influence, well, he does the deed with Black Cat. He sleeps with her. And so now Peter also asks out Felicia, not knowing they're the same person, obviously, and, well, she accepts. Now, he takes her to the nightclub, and we get that same cringy dance sequence, which ends with Peter hitting Mary Jane, and Felicia just leaves Peter in anger and disgust, and if it were up to me, I'd actually have her slap him in the face, just because I think that she'd be more strong-willed than Gwen. So now later on when Peter has his big fight with the Sandman and Venom with MJ as the hostage, Black Cat and Harry Osborn arrive to help him out. And with her presence, I actually don't think Harry would die, because circumstances are different. It's 3 people instead of 2. And so now the day is saved, and she and Peter finally learn each other's secret identities. Now in the end, Mary Jane will either decide to date Harry or leave New York, because sadly Kirsten Dunst wanted to leave the series behind anyway, and this would just be a logical way to do it. Besides, at this point, maybe Peter and MJ are better off apart, I'm sorry to say. Honestly, the relationship had just gotten very, very toxic by this point. It was toxic in the actual Spider-Man 3, and I think it would have been even more toxic in this version, possibly. And ultimately, Felicia decides that she doesn't want to date Peter right now. She says that Spider-Man and Peter encouraged her to, stop being a doormat and become stronger. But she can't be with someone who has been as selfish as Peter's been in this movie. But she's not unsympathetic. I mean, she realizes it was the Black Suit's fault, mostly. But, of course, that there was still that darkness in Peter all along that she knows is there. And she says she needs time to see that the Spider-Man that inspired her is really back. So this sets up the dynamic for Spider-Man 4, which will be all about him trying to make amends with her. Or if they wanted to go this route, they could, get rid of her, do her own solo movie possibly, and then set Peter up with Gwen in Spider-Man 4, whatever they want to do. And so that is what if Black Cat had been in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. So, did I make some controversial decisions with this one? You betcha. I'm well aware there's supposed to be a big age gap between these two, or not like the biggest age gap in the world, but like an age gap big enough that actually made her throw up when she found out he was a teenager in the comics at one point, which obviously I didn't want to do. And here's the reason why. Because it turns out that Kirsten Dunst, as I said, did not want to stick around as Mary Jane past Spider-Man 4. In fact, she actually wanted to leave after Spider-Man 3, from what I've heard. And they wanted Black Cat to be his new love interest in the second half of the saga, because the series is supposed to go up to Spider-Man 6. So it'd be kind of a series of 2 trilogies. The first being about Peter and MJ, and then the second being about Peter and Black Cat. So if they were going to make Black Cat more than just a fling, then I do think it's kind of important to close that gap, and build them up for movies on end, which is what I would have done just to make her a believable second choice for Peter after Mary Jane. Now, as far as me having Peter and Black Cat hook up in Spider-Man 3, I know it's going to be very controversial, but hear me out. I mean, he would have done it under the influence of the symbiote. Like, regular Peter, I could not imagine doing that. But symbiote Peter, I could imagine, actually going for it. Because, it makes him do things that he wouldn't normally do. It made him act like a complete asshole in Spider-Man 3. So, I can't imagine the bumbling, Peter Parker who, says, punch me, I bleed. I can't imagine that Peter cheating on Mary Jane. But, the Peter Parker who dances down the street and snaps at women's butts, you bet your ass I could imagine him cheating on Mary Jane, even if it's not technically cheating, so it was right after they broke up, but it would still be, I think, kind of viewed negatively by most people, and I don't know if a lot of people would forgive him for that, because I know there are plenty of people who don't forgive him for hitting Mary Jane, even if it was by accident, so I don't know how well this would translate, but it's honestly just what I think would happen. I just can't imagine regular Peter, sleeping with Black Cat, at least not Tobey Maguire's Peter, unless, of course, he had the black suit. And yeah, I know some people are going to get mad at me for making them the same age, but I just think it's important to build up a relationship between them. Just in case, Mary Jane, in case they decide to kill her off, or if Kirsten Dunst decided she didn't want to play her anymore, I think it would have been, good to set up a possible secondary love interest to replace her in the case that she left, which is what I wrote this, having in mind, was setting her up from the very beginning to be a possible new love interest for Peter going forward, like they plan to do with Spider-Man 4, 5, and 6. Now, do I think Anne Hathaway would have been a good Black Cat? Honestly, yeah. And no, I'm not just saying that because she played Catwoman. And yes, I know it's ironic that she was going to play Black Cat and then she ended up playing Catwoman. I'm well aware of how weird that is. But no, it's mostly just because Anne Hathaway is such an amazing, amazing actress, no pun intended. Because, she's been in so many good roles over the years. She showed that she could play a woman that had just been battered by life in general in Les Miserables. She did that so good in Les Miserables. Somebody who's just had, bad thing after bad thing happened to her, let people get to her because she was going to be abused in these. Well, okay, that wasn't the plan. I admit I made that up. But that's because it it happened in the comics, so, you know, I just thought it would make sense. And it would give her an arc to eventually become Black Cat after being inspired by Spider-Man, which I know is going to be controversial, and I'm really sorry if some of you don't like it. I'm really sorry. It's just an idea I had, and if you guys don't like it, I completely understand. But I just, you know, I think it would be a good arc, you know, to show her, you know, picking herself up, dusting herself off, and, you know, doing something really good with, you know, what Spider-Man has motivated her to do with her life. You know, show the impact that Spider-Man has on New York. So yeah, her work in Les Miserables shows me that she can play that type of character, and her role in The Devil Wears Prada shows me that confidence, that swagger I could also imagine her giving as Black Cat. You know, that big turnaround from, you know, normal girl, battered by the world in the case of Les Mis, going into like this confident, mature woman in complete control of her actions and everything going on around her, like in The Devil Wears Prada. So yes, I think Anne Hathaway would have been perfectly cast as Black Cat, and I know some of you guys are going to ask, yes, she has the looks as well, of course. Anne Hathaway is a gorgeous woman. Do I even have to say that? Now, do I think her presence would have improved the trilogy? It's hard to say. If I'm being honest with you, I think that her presence might have annoyed people. I think that people who were really into Peter and Mary Jane would kind of be annoyed by this constant, you know, presence of Felicia. You know, constantly teasing the idea that Peter and Mary Jane might break up and he might end up with Felicia instead. You know, I think that would bother people a little bit. And as I said, I mean, not everybody is going to like the storyline I gave her where she's in the same school as Peter, or the story I gave her where, you know, she has an abusive boyfriend. I know that's not going to be for everybody, and people might have gotten a little tired of seeing, you know, women being abused storylines in movies. So I can't say for sure if her presence would have improved anything. I do admit seeing Peter actually, you know, sleep with Black Cat in Spider-Man 3 would have really emphasized what the suit can turn people into in a way that's not just comedic, because they play the suit for comedy a lot in that movie, but it would also show just how far it can push people to be someone they're not. Is Peter Parker James Bond who can just sleep with everybody? No, he's not. He's the one and only guy. But the symbiote makes him not that guy. The suit makes him somebody he's not. And I think by having him hook up with Black Cat, that would really emphasize it all the more. But yeah, so do I think that that ultimately this was for the best that she was not in it? Sadly, yes. I just think that the trilogy is better off without Black Cat. And I like Black Cat, but personally, I just think that it would have been better to hold her off until Spider-Man 4. And yes, I know I didn't address the fact that the Vulture is her father. In previous videos, I've had Adrian Toomes, you know, trying to run Harry Osborn out of Oscorp Industries throughout Spider-Man 2, and then become the head of Oscorp in 3, and then become the Vulture in 4. And that's honestly what I would do. I wouldn't even reveal that they're related until Spider-Man 4, because you don't need to. And then you can kind of do the thing where, like, Peter wants to date Felicia and then finds out her dad is the Vulture. Sort of the thing that they did in Spider-Man Homecoming, which I think would have been really interesting in the Raimi-verse. But anyway, guys, do you hate this scenario with a passion? I cannot wait to hear all about it in the comments down below. Also, if you do like it, I would also love to hear about that in the comments down below, preferably more than people who hate it. But if you hate it, please don't lie. Like, I love the feedback, and I'm not opposed to making version 2. So if you guys would rather see the more traditional femme fatale Black Cat throughout all 3 movies, then I'll absolutely do it. No problem. No questions asked, I will do it. But if you do like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms, and give me more what if recommendations in the comments down below about Spider-Man, Marvel, or whatever the hell else you can think of. And I'll see all of you in the next video.